have a substitute just now.
Oh, we can start. We can start. I know we stand between our panel session and our lunch. So we do have around 33 minutes. And I have a very eminent women leadership team here. I have Shamina Singh from Mastercard. She has led multiple initiatives in the US and across the world for Mastercard, especially in the finance sector. And then I have Asha coming from Silicon Valley, focused on high tech, and has done a lot of initiatives on US-India corridor. And then on my right is Nivruti Rai. And Nivruti is the CEO of Invest India, the first women CEO, leading investment opportunity for multinational companies coming to India. So let's start, because I think the crux of the discussion is basically the US-India corridor, and more important is the role of women, the moonshot for women between that corridor itself. India is a rising power, and one day it'll be a great power. The question is what role women will play in its rise. And we are seeing that's happening quite a bit. In fact, when you look at the India's mission to moon landing, 65% of the team were women. And what was fascinating is these are women who didn't come from the premier institutions of IIT and IIMs. They came from tier 2, 3 cities, tier 3 cities. So it shows that the determination, the education, the focus on being engaged in the STEM program is very, very strong. So let me start with Asha first. Asha, from your perspective, when you look at India-US corridor, we're seeing tremendous amount of activity taking place from trade, technology, people to people. How do you see and what can you do to get more women involved on both sides of the ocean and engaged in the tech sector itself?
So, so listen, I think each of us have a role to play. And what I'm doing from my side is I'm partnering with something called TIE. It stands for the Indus Entrepreneurs. TIE is an organization that was founded about 40 years ago by the first generation of Indian entrepreneurs who wanted to give back. And so TIE now has chapters across the globe, including in Middle East and Africa. So what TIE is doing for us, for the Motwani Foundation, actually, they're helping us to do an outreach to women entrepreneurs in about 75 countries, not only in India and South Asia in general, but also Middle East and Africa. They do an outreach that there's a competition, and each chapter now finds close to 10 to 15 startups which are led by women. So they get about 600 to 700 startups that they shortlist. Of that, about 40 are brought to the TIE Global event that happens annually. I strongly recommend those of you who are interested in this startup activity, if you're interested in doing your own startup, to show up at TIE Global. Believe it or not, it's one of the most powerful conferences that happens in the world. It's TIE Global, tieglobal.org. You must show up. So let's say about 40 women CEOs, and these are very young startups. Some of them are even impact startups. Once they show up, off that, I pick 5, and I bring them to Silicon Valley to work with them and to handhold them through the process of raising the first round of funding. Some of it I'll be investing myself, but some of it is also coming from my other angel and seed investor friends. The idea is personally, the idea for me is to accelerate at least 5 women-led startups per year by myself. And the rest, there are many other groups that are already looking at these companies as, there's actually a competition going on now, because once they get to the top TIE 40, there is actually a competition globally from the venture capital world for these startups. That's why I'm insistent that those of you who want to do your own company, your own startup, please look at tie.org, TIE.org, and that's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Asha. Let me come to Shamina. Mastercard has taken the lead on financial sector, especially on women engagement. I remember when Ajay Banga was there, we worked very closely from that perspective. He left for a bureaucratic job after leaving a great company. And so, Shamina, tell us, from your perspective, engagement of women, what are the success factors you saw as you drove in the financial sector itself?
So I think for those of you who may not know, Ajay Banga is now the head of the World Bank. And so he went from, I guess I'll tell him that you said he was a bureaucrat, Mukesh. I'm sure he'll be appreciative of that. But I think that the magic, I think, of the work that not only he did, but that we're doing at Mastercard is really creating new models of the way private sector can engage at scale to create impact. And the way that we do that is that we don't see it as any different from the business strategy. So for Mastercard, who you may or may not know is a payments company, and I hope everybody has one in their phone and wallet and everywhere else. But we have business in 210 countries all around the world, one of the largest networks in the world. 100 million businesses are on the platform, 3 billion cardholders are on the platform. And when you have that kind of reach and that kind of scale, when you start to leverage the technology, the network, the data analytics, the capital, and the people in service of social impact, you can really create enormous change. But the differentiator is, if you tie that to your business strategy, then it becomes a conversation that you're having all the way from Investor Day to Volunteer Day to Social Impact Day and every day in between. And that's the difference that we created at Mastercard. We made a pledge probably when Ajay first appeared at the World Bank way back in like 2018 to bring 500 million people into the formal economy. At the time, there were about 3 billion people who were completely disconnected to the formal economy, most of them or many of them in India. And the reason why we made that pledge is for the company bringing the more people who can transact in the formal economy, in the digital economy. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but actually it's taken shape over the last 10 years, ultimately become customers or can benefit from the use of Mastercard. So our shareholders actually saw this shift to the digital economy as a real big business imperative for the company. It just also happened to be a really big impact narrative for the company. And that's why we created the Center for Inclusive Growth, was to really capture that moment and centralize resources in such a way that for countries like India, we showed up in a big way. And so what does that look like now for women in India? This enabling factor. So this piece, we've started a program in India, we call it Strive India. And it started actually before, maybe like 5 years ago, but we started investing resources to empower women to reach their potential through small businesses. One of the things we realized, especially with women in India, was that they were disconnected from the formal economy. So we did a lot of work along with the Indian government, who has created a financial inclusion mechanism where many Indians are now financially included. But the thing that happens with women is they don't have the same access to credit as men. And that happens everywhere, but especially in India. And why is that? Because they don't have collateral in the same way that men do. So women necessarily don't own land or don't have something so that when they show up to a bank and say, hey, I want to get a loan to do my business or whatever else, they're not going to get the loan. So we started working with our customers like HDFC Bank and some others to redefine what it means to have credit in India. And when you're a Mastercard and you have these conversations, we can actually move the needle. So we worked with them to do things like recognize gold as a proxy for credit. Because in India, women, when they get married or in other parts of their lives, have gold. That is wealth. But they also have the behavior through microfinance organizations that we know that they pay back their loans. So as Mastercard and as the Center for Inclusive Growth, we started working with banks to recognize proxy for credit scores, especially tailored to women. We started out with a pilot program, and then this is where the corridor comes in, Mukesh. We worked with USAID to then create a risk fund, a risk pool, to to backstop any lending that banks were doing to women in case they didn't pay it back. We knew they would pay it back. But banks said, you know what, it's too expensive to lend to women. It's too hard to lend to women. They may not pack, they don't meet the risk profile. So we work with the USAID to pull in $100 million risk capital fund to backstop these loans. That created the trust that enabled this group, this bank in particular, to reach out to women and start lending. That's a really tangible example of how you use development dollars to build scale. The philanthropy capital came in because we wanted to make sure they were getting trained in the right way, from the right people, with the right tools. And so we have been working with organizations like CII and on-the-ground organizations to ensure that women are getting the training that they need to not only pull down the capital, but then to succeed in their business. That's the power of Strive India. It has 3 components: enabling women and other small business owners to get capital, go digital, and grow their networks and know-how. Those are the 3 recipes that we've figured out are the biggest interventions we can make to ensure that small businesses grow in India. That's just one. I'm happy to talk about more, but we have another big partnership, and I'll just say one with Bharti Airtel Payment Bank. I don't know if Jadeja is here, but she just won the Schwab Entrepreneur Award this year. And in part because what she's done is created a Sahelis program, meaning a sisters program, where they're in Rajasthan, they're creating 100,000 digital agents who are now they're selling things like airtime to other women in the villages, so that the phone, this huge enabling mechanism for women to reach their potential in India, the phone. The other Sahelis, their sisters, are selling them minutes. They're selling them other things in order for them to be successful. Frontier Markets is creating an entire platform in Rajasthan to make this successful. So I guess the big thing for me, Mukesh, is when you have private sector thinking in this way, thinking about using their assets for impact in the right ways, you can really achieve scale and momentum in a way that I think we've never seen before.
Thank you, Shamina. I'll come back to you on a follow-up question on that. But let me bring in Nivruti. You worked in the Valley, you worked in the Bangalore Valley, and Intel, other high-tech companies, and now leading the Invest India initiative across the world itself. Talk about your effort as to not only just bringing investment in India, but the role of women in the venture you put together here.
Thank you, Mukesh. I want to introduce myself. Like Mukesh said, the only other company that I worked for is Intel. And I've spent 30 years in Intel doing semiconductor design. So I can tell you one thing that as an introduction for me, is because I do a lot of circuit design, so pardon my terminology, but I will explain. I have a fantastic glitch filter in my brain. Now, this glitch filter works for my eyes and my ears. What this means is in circuit, your voltage is supposed to be like this. When the voltage goes like this, you feel a blip in the electricity or your bulb or whatever. Similarly, in the circuit, you cannot have a blip because it will make an incorrect computation. So when I get the feeling that there is a glitch coming from whoever, sometimes I get glitches from women also. So, I don't differentiate. I just do not like glitches, and I just process, and I don't hear it. So I have a glitch in my brain, and I don't see a glitch. I don't feel a glitch. So here's a man sitting next to me. I just see him as a soul. I see him for his competency, and that's how I've worked. Because in Intel, if I were to tell you if corporations had gender, Intel would be as masculine as you can imagine. The conception and the preconceived notion of a man that people have, that's what Intel would be. So for me, the glitch filter was very important. Second thing is, I'm fearless. I really don't care. And I have plan B. I always have a plan B, and I have a plan C because I fall. Many times I've fallen, but I get up and run with a plan B. And what I want to do is every place I fell, I want to share it with everybody. our daughters, his son, your son, everybody, for the one simple reason that I do not want anybody else to fall there and find another fall. So people can keep learning. So that's how I have worked. And I have not missed any moment to reach out to women and tell them my story. And I'm not saying I'm very successful, but I have gone from a point A to a point B, and there are very many routes to go from point A to point B. And I want to share my route so that people don't fall where I fell. They take another route and they bypass the. So that's how I have worked. I moved from Intel to Invest India just 4.5 months ago, and it was very hard. I moved thinking I was leaving a star. Intel is a great company. It's like a conglomerate. I have done so many things other than HR, which I feel HR we do every day at home, at work. I've done everything in Intel. So leaving that company was tough. But I thought to myself, this is my chance. India has a tailwind going for itself, and it has demonstrated. It has demonstrated in R&D, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to give you real-life examples. My company, when I took over, in India, I worked for 15 years, and last decade, I was the country president for Intel. When I started, we were 4,000 people. When I left, we were 30,000. So we have demonstrated R&D. I also feel that India has a lot of solutions that have been driven at scale. You know, when the pandemic happened, you would think that the country whose GDP per capita is $2,000, would just succumb and fall. But the way the governance happened was on the shoulder of technology. I've seen how medicines were distributed, how vegetable vendors were aggregated through phone messaging, and then this aggregated vegetables were sent to people's home, again through technology. So India has understood that if India has to rise and catapult, it's going to be on the shoulder of technology. And I also feel that my country chose me to lead this role because I come from a technical background. I'm as private sector as anybody can be, because that's the only experience I have. Because when I go speak to companies, I understand, I empathize on the challenges. I'm not saying India has zero problems. India has quite a few problems. But I can tell you this, in the last 4.5 months, the one change that I have seen, and significant, is the Indian government is listening. There's nothing more beautiful than tasting success. And the government and the people of India have seen that with technology, with a listening ear, they can do a lot. And today's problems are solutions that need countries and companies to participate. And one thing, and I don't want to miss Mukesh's question, there was a time when I would say, if all the women came to the workforce and were paid with parity, we would create a China economy. And I'm really happy to tell you, and this was not so long back. But let me tell you the new statistic. The new statistic is, if all of us came to the workforce and were paid with the right parity, we would create a United States economy. 30 trillion. So that's the power of women. And like I said, my two simple solutions: build a glitch filter and be fearless. What the hell is a glass ceiling? There's nothing. Break it. It might bleed a little. Just put some bandage and move on. We have to work harder. But if you have dreams, then you've got to do this. And I really hope, sometimes I feel so powerful. I'm not a Christian, but I've read a lot of stories from Bible, Moses, seen 10 Commandments. I feel I am so powerful that if I walk through the ocean of bias, I'll break the ocean and have all the children walk behind me. That's the power I have. One last thing on Invest India. I know my answer is very long. When I was with Intel, I created this a slogan for myself. And by the way, that was one of the reasons I got the job of country president for Intel in India. I said, I want to maximize Intel with maximum India. Maximize Intel with maximum India. And more often, the second line gets missed out, which is, I want to maximize India with maximum Intel. Now I have Intel happy and India happy. So when I moved to Invest India, I said, let me just use my own tagline, and I changed it a little bit. Because India houses 18% of the world population, the onus of driving value for the world is also on India. 20% of the onus is with India. So therefore, I took my own tagline and I said, I want to maximize the world with maximum India. And I want to maximize India with maximum world. And that's why I'm here at Davos. I'm here to create partners. I'm here to listen. I'm here to address the challenges we have as India. But I can tell you, we have the hunger. We have the tailwind. I am just going to work to build the acceleration and make my tagline come true in my lifetime.
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Mukesh a question here. So Mukesh Aghi runs something called USISPF, which is a Washington-based entity. And I want to know more about, Mukesh, when is it that you first sensed that there is a very powerful synergy between the United States and India? When did you sense it, and what made you set up this powerful entity that you have, which is now become a de facto go-to place for this emerging corridor between US and India? Tell us that, a little bit of that journey.
I would give credit to Ajay Banga. Now, well, I think you have to understand there are geopolitics taking place. One is you have a rising China, which US feels as a threat, and India has been basically seen aggression by China. And so from that perspective, you have India, US getting together, two democracies, rising economies. The second factor which we're seeing is US companies in China are getting harassed more and more. So they're shifting their operations from China into other geographies, and India becomes a critical aspect. Not only just de-risking their supply chain, but also market opportunity. A $4 trillion economy will be a $5 trillion economy in the next 3 years and keep on growing. And one thing which you have to understand, Indian consumer love to buy US goods and services. India sends at the moment 272,000 students going to college in the United States last year, spending over $9 billion. We buy all the, from the Hollywood music to Bollywood, which is coming from India. So there's more collaboration. The other factor which is important is you have 5 million Indian Americans in the US, which are 1.5% of the population, but they're producing 6% of the GDP. So that means their financial know-how is much, much higher than the rest of the population. But on the technology front, we are seeing a lot of collaboration taking place. You look at a company like Qualcomm, 50% of its IP is coming from India. Look at IBM, a lot of their quantum computing research is happening in India. So I think that's continuing. But if I may just shift that to Shamina and then to you on that aspect, why India and US relationship is important, why there's a potential to collaborate, especially on women aspect. Because culturally, both countries are different from a gender perspective. India politically has had a prime minister for 16 years under Mrs. Gandhi. And then if you look at politically, you had multiple presidents, Speaker of the House. If you look at on the parliament side, a large number of leaders are women. Whereas in the US, politically, we never had a US president, which is a woman. And so there's a dichotomy between the two countries from a cultural aspect. Whereas when you see the whole cultural aspect within women in India, they're driving a lot of not-for-profit initiatives trying to bring change while government is also working. So it is women who are driving the change in India from that perspective. So I want to come to Shamina. Shamina, from a Mastercard perspective, you have is a Fortune 100 company. You are held accountable to your shareholders. At the same time, you have a culture which says we want to get women more empowered. We want to give more loans. How do you find that balance to take that forward? And also, how do you define success as you move forward?
It's a great question, and I think it's one thing to know for people who may not know this about Mastercard is our largest shareholder is actually the Mastercard Foundation. So when Mastercard went public as a company, we took 10% of our stock and created the Mastercard Foundation. So they're our largest shareholders. So that drives a culture of this notion of doing well by doing good, always figuring out the third, the fourth, the fifth way to ensure that we are tying impact to the bottom line of the business. And we've been pretty successful. That foundation today is valued at about $40 billion. It's probably one of the largest private philanthropies in the world. And what that means for shareholders at Mastercard is where I started, which is if you're focused on financial inclusion in the digital economy, there is a when I started at Mastercard, we identified $4 trillion in purchasing power in the informal economy, $4 trillion. And so if the company could even get a bit of that, and the only way to get part of that is to ensure that more people could prosper in the digital economy. The people who are prospering, they have to be women, because what we also know is 85% of purchasing consumer decisions are made by women. Health decisions, food decisions, education decisions. So women are in the driver's seat. What we have to do is unlock the enabling infrastructure around them to ensure that they can succeed. Sometimes that looks like regulation, but sometimes it looks like tweaking the work around money, around credit, around things like that. So I'll just give you one example, I think, of what inspired me to do this work in India. And that's, I'll tell a quick story. I promise I won't take too long. But if anybody knows Chetna Sinha, she won a social entrepreneurship award here several years ago. She started something called Mandeshi Bank, which is doorstep banking. She turned the notion of banking on its head because the members of Mandeshi said that they wanted their own bank, they wanted their own account, they wanted their own ability to control their money. Well, in India, that's kind of hard to do because the regulations say that you have to have a husband or a father sign onto your account. That's a regulation that needs to change so that women can manage their own money. So what Mandeshi said is, okay, don't change the regulation, just let us have our own bank, and we'll be in charge. The bank told her, the bank said to them, we can't give you a license because you're not literate, you can't read, because these were women farmers. So they learned how to read. And then they went back to the regulator and said, okay, now we know how to read. Give us our banking license. They said, we can't give you a banking license. You don't even know how to calculate. You can't do rudimentary mathematics or arithmetic or whatever. The women sitting in the office said, we challenge your back office men, your banking agents right now, to a competition. If we can't figure out the interest rates in our brain faster than they can do it with a piece of pencil, don't give us the license, the paper and pencil. And they got the license. So now Mandeshi Bank has changed the definition of banking for women. Those are the types of things we have to do that make a difference not only to the women to unleash their potential, but also make big business differences for companies like Mastercard.
Well done, Shamina. I'm going to ask Nivruti and Asha, the new phenomenon is AI. And what we're seeing is a tremendous momentum. But we're also seeing that women are not as engaged in that success as we're seeing men are. And I think if we're going to get more women into technology, especially into the newer technology, we need to get them more empowered in this arena. So any suggestion, what you're doing, what can be done, what can we all as a constituency drive in that direction itself? Asha?
So when I invest in companies as a venture capitalist, my top calculus is to make sure that I get return on investment, and it's multiple X. So normally I don't care about who's running the company, but if there is a woman in the C-suite, then I do know that the company is going to be more stable, they're going to be more prudent on spending, they're going to be a little bit more prudent on hiring and firing people. It just gives me more confidence. And I'm beginning to see that in a lot of AI startups, there are women in the management teams that they may not be CEOs yet, but they are very much, like for example at OpenAI, the woman who is the CTO, there's a very powerful role she has, and she is very much in the driver's seat because Sam Altman is out, mostly front-facing the world. So you do have those role models also emerging now. And one of the things that I'm seeing at Google is that a lot of the sort of the management team in AI, including the lady who runs the AI Ventures arm of Google, it's called Gradient Ventures, Anna Patterson, that she's been running, she set it up actually, Sundar and team had put together this fund exclusively for her to invest in AI startups. And Gradient is doing a phenomenal job. Anna Patterson is a PhD in computer science from Stanford. She's actually Rajiv's student. So I know her well, and I co-invest with her, with Anna. And so in that sense, there is a movement now, Mukesh. But you're right that AI, of course, you will see many more men because that's it's a tech field, it's a computer science field which has always had men in the driver's seat, and it's wonderful actually. I think it's very nice that we have this this entrepreneurial sort of explosion of energy in AI, and women are very much in the thick of it, right? And I'm seeing that growth literally by the day.
What I feel that there is a lot of ambiguity about AI and what AI is amongst many of us. And I will not say it's only women, men also. I'll be very honest, so many even CEOs talk about AI, not really understanding. And I want to tell you the other thing. There are two parts of how you can be involved in AI. One is build AI, the Sam Altmans, and then the other is use AI. I will tell you that very soon, there used to be a time that I used to say, oh, tomorrow. But I feel, it's already beginning. Everybody will be using AI. And I really feel that because AI is supposedly a very complex thing and very hard for people to comprehend, women are not being involved. So what we as Intel have, and I'll tell you what I did as Invest India also, I got 100% the 30,000 people of Intel India trained on AI. 3 levels of AI, level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 1 and level 2 for using, level 3 for building, everybody. And that included finance, HR, anybody, everybody, because 100% of us will be using AI. And when I came to Invest India, I did the same. I have a much smaller team, but I did that. The second thing is, in this training, we are trying to explain what AI can do. AI can enable diagnostics. AI leverages a lot of software. AI leverages a lot of analysis. AI leverages simple things like data annotation. When you see data, and let's say a picture of a breast cancer scan, and the doctor tells you everywhere you see a red spot, you click on this button. Everywhere you see a green spot, you click this button. And by the way, if you see a red dot surrounding by a green spot, that is a cancer. So that's called data annotation. The world has so much data, but the data is very unclean. So I really believe that there are different types of AI startups that we can work on. And I really want to break the black box that AI is. And to do that, we have driven training. The other thing that we've done, and as Intel, my ex-company, we trained 350,000 children from 8th through 12th on AI. Just because we want to demystify AI. It is not complex. For the last 40, 50 years, we have been working on AI. And the only reason you hear so much about AI, because compute is getting cheaper. In 2000, for genome sequencing, you paid billions of dollars. Now, you'll do it in hundreds of dollars on a phone. So when computers become this cheaper, battery has become this cheaper, you can do cloud, you can do your device. That's why AI has come to a use case where we are even recommending buy this on Amazon based on your AI recommendation engine. So I believe it's all about skilling, it's about training, it's about demystifying, and it's about holding hands to say, you know, this, you're so amazing. You can do it. And the last thing I want to tell you, in Intel, out of Intel India, me and my team architected Intel's first inference engine. So being a woman, I had, you know, a lot of women in my team. We did it together. So I really believe it's all about demystifying, and we are doing our bit. Every drop counts. Whoever gets a chance should demystify.
Thank you. Thank you. I am conscious of the time, and so I'm going to ask a question on Moonshot. You know, our objective is to empower 1 million women. I think the number should be higher. I will talk to Ruba about that. Shamina, from your perspective, what would be the moonshot when we look at India-US corridor in regards to women? And when we come back next year, same time, you know, how would you define that as a success? We were successful.
I think it's a great question. I think the moonshot is India is making the moonshot. Like India is going for it right now. This is the moment that they have you said a tailwind, but I think if India can attract women like you to leave their jobs at Intel and start to run organizations like Invest India, and India produces people like you who are using your skills, your money, your wealth to create new and invest in other Indian women. And if companies from the private sector are using their assets to build the capacity of women to unleash their potential, I think like AI, we can't even comprehend what the future is going to look like for women. So if I come back here a year from now and we have the same conversation, I don't know that we'll have hit the moonshot by then, but I know that for the work that we're doing, we'll have unleashed the power of at least 1 million women in India to realize the power of their work around small business initiatives. And that's a pretty great thing. So thanks.
Thank you, Shamina. So I think we'll definitely have you next year. And, you know, that's a great commitment, actually. 1 million women, just Mastercard doing it. Congratulations. Asha?
So for me, my moonshot would be, and my dream is for next year, is to partner with Seva, which is a non-profit based in Gujarat, in Ahmedabad. And it was started, you know, many years ago, but by now it has millions of women in their network. And my moonshot is, you know, and I've started negotiating with them actually, is to provide a little bit of, you know, loans sort of without credit scores to their women to see if they can start, you know, little businesses by themselves. I know that women normally return, 99% of women return your capital, if not give you more, so, you know, it could go up to 2x, but my hope is to at least impact the first few batches of women at Seva and be able to talk about it next year.
Thank you.
My moonshot is, and I'm going to first tell you the moonshot, then describe it. My moonshot is next year I want Mukesh Aghi to tell to this crowd that the trust corridor between nations who have similar goals of population scale, good for health, for education, for food, the corridors that were built between these countries to share data that drives collaborative innovation, 60% of them were women. I want, just like the Moon program in India, I want him to say, women drove this trusted corridor between geographies that wanted to collaborate and work on population scale good.
Thank you. Well, you know, 1 million women by Mastercard, funding startups in India, especially people who don't have any credit scores, and obviously working in the trust corridor. A round of applause for my panelists, and once again, thank you.